I never knew the healer who saved my fiancé's life would become my true love. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The urgent beeping of the machines echoed in my ears. I could barely breathe. My heart felt like it was pounding in my throat. James lay there, pale as a ghost, tubes snaking around his body like vicious vipers. I held his hand, cold and lifeless. "Please, don't leave me," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. The waiting room buzzed with anxious faces, all hoping for a miracle. That's when she appeared. The healer. She swept in like a tempest, her long dark hair flowing, her green eyes alight with an intensity that could burn through the dim hospital lighting. Aliyah. I didn't know her, but there was something about her. She moved with an unexplainable grace, her fingers dancing over James' skin as if she understood something profound. I felt the room shrink, the world outside falling silent. Aliyah whispered in a language I didn't recognize, the words gliding through the air like soft music. I felt a strange energy crackle between USA magnetic pull. I watched in awe as her touch transformed James, his heart rate stabilizing. The doctors only had so much hope. They didn't believe, but I did. Her presence made me feel like a fragile flower in a storm, both terrified and alive. The way she took charge fascinated me. She weaved through the chaos, her calmness an oasis. And as she worked her magic, a shadow of doubt fluttered inside me. Who was this woman who seemed to hold life and death in her hands? Suddenly, James gasped, his eyes fluttering open. My heart burst with joy. But Aliyah held my gaze, her expression was unreadable. Had she stirred something beyond just the physical? Unanswered questions hung thick in the air. I felt torn, a gulf opening between gratitude and something more, something unnameable. Who was she? What did this mean for us? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The days that followed James' miraculous recovery felt like walking through a dream where the ground shifted beneath me with every step. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, joy for James' return to life and an unsettling sense of inadequacy as I watched him struggle to adjust. The sight of him, skin still pale, voice raspy, and eyes that seemed to search for something lost. It tore at my heart, the way he smiled through the fear and uncertainty. Aliyah visited often, her aura infusing the sterile hospital with warmth. Each time she entered, a flicker of hope ignited inside me, though it came entwined with envy. Watching her work with James, it was clear he found strength in her, something I struggled to provide. I wanted to be the one to guide him toward healing, yet there was Aliyah, thriving in a realm I didn't understand, unlocking parts of him that I feared I couldn't reach. One evening, after her treatments, I gathered the courage to speak to her. "How did you learn to do this?" I asked, my voice barely rising above a whisper. We were in the small break room, the hum of fluorescent lights swirling around us like the tension in the air. Aliyah turned her gaze from her hands, which fidgeted restlessly. "It's not just about healing. It's about connecting." Her words hung heavily between us, threads weaving an invisible bond. Each person is a universe. We're all tangled up in pain, joy, and memories. To heal, you must first understand what they've lived. I nodded, trying to grasp the weight of her insight. But I couldn't shake the gnawing question that lingered like a shadow. Did she understand James better than I did? Days melted into each other. We all settled into a fragile routine, James continuing physical therapy, Aliyah working her strange magic, and me balancing the emotions knotting up inside my chest. The moments of lightness were rare, but they came quietly. Like the way James laughed at a funny story Aliyah shared from her early years as a healer, his laughter ringing through the cold hospital walls, warming my heart. Yet there were dark clouds hovering just above us. James began to have nightmares that left him drenched in sweat, the visions of his near-death experience haunting his nights. I'd sit beside him, brushing my fingers through his hair, but the fear in his eyes remained insatiable, searching for something that felt just beyond his reach. "Why do I keep seeing it?" he whispered one night, his breath shaky. "Why can't I forget?" I wished I had the answers. I wished I could shield him from pain, encase him in tranquility. But as I gazed into his troubled eyes, I realized that healing was not only about physical recovery, it was a labyrinth where light and darkness danced in tandem. During one particularly emotional night, I stepped into the waiting area to take a moment for myself. Suddenly, Aliyah was by my side, her presence comforting like a warm blanket against the chill of the hospital environment. "Sometimes, we must face our fears to move on, Ashlyn," she said softly, her voice striking a chord I didn't know existed within me. "I am starting to think he might need you more than he needs me," I confessed, the words spilling out before I could filter them. "What if I'm not enough?" Aliyah took a tentative step closer. "You are enough. But perhaps you need to let him find his own way to heal. It doesn't mean you aren't doing your part." Her words settled over me like a balm, yet the tension between us crackled, an electric pull that sent chills rushing down my spine. I fought the urge to step back, to distance myself from the confusion blooming inside my heart. Days later, James' therapist recommended a retreat designed for patients who underwent similar experiences. It felt like a glimmer of hope, a promise of healing beyond the confines of cold hospital walls. But it presented a dilemma. Encouraging him to go would mean stepping away from both of them, putting space between my mounting feelings and the reality of our lives. James was hesitant, his hands trembling as he held the brochure. "I don't know if I can face those memories without you, both of you." In that moment, Aliyah stepped forward, her gentle expression unwavering. "You need to find your path, James. We'll be here. You're not alone in this." The sincerity in her voice pierced through my heart. It was a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. But as I watched him look at her, a flicker of something deeper ignited in his gaze, and I felt an icy grip seize my chest. The decision loomed overhead like a storm cloud. James going away meant more than just a physical distance. It meant confronting what was festering beneath the surface, the connection that hummed between Aliyah and me, enmeshing us in a web of complexity. With each passing moment, it became harder to ignore the truth. I needed to know if he felt for her what I feared I could never express. So, I chose to take a deep breath, speak my heart into the dark kitchen with its half-empty coffee cups, and seek confirmation or closure with James. He sat at the table, looking over the brochure with swirling optimism and fear. "What if this helps me find myself again? What if I'm not the same person anymore? What if it's a chance to rediscover who you can be?" I urged, my heart pushing against the walls I'd built. "No matter what, you will always be you." I took a step closer, breathing in the moment like the last flicker of sunlight before the fall of night. He looked up, his eyes searching mine. "But what if I find someone else on the other side?" The weight of his words struck like a comet. A part of me wanted to scream, echoing every insecurity that plagued me since I met Aliyah. But just as I opened my mouth to answer, the hospital's intercom sounded, announcing a code blue in the nearby ward. A chaos erupted, dragging us into the whirlwind of emotions and uncertainty once more. And with that announcement echoing through the air, a new fear took shape in the silence between us. What if this was the moment everything changed? What if at that moment, when the chaos seemed unholy, we lost everything we had just begun to hope for? The whirlwind of chaos that followed the loud announcement sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I turned to James, our conversation caught abruptly, suspended in the air like unfinished business. His face, pale and uncertain, mirrored my own swirling thoughts. Would we be forced to confront the fragility of our situation amidst the impending turmoil? As the hospital staff sprang into action, I instinctively took James's hand. It was a primal urge, a desperate attempt to anchor both of us in the storm. "Please, stay with me," I whispered, the words more of a plea than a statement. "Always," he replied, though I could hear the tremor beneath his steady exterior. In that fragile moment, we both clung to our shared reality, the one where we could still laugh, cry, and confront our fears together, despite the overwhelming uncertainties. But as nurses rushed past us, their expressions stark and serious, a new thread tightened around my heart. Something about this didn't feel right. The fabric of our existence was beginning to unravel. "Let's just walk," I suggested, leading him toward the small garden tucked away behind thick glass doors. The shadows of panic and despair still weighed heavily on us, but the sight of flowers struggling to bloom outside the stark hospital walls reminded me that life could flourish even in the face of darkness. As we stepped out, the air seemed to lift the burden from our shoulders, at least for a moment. The soft sound of water trickling in the fountain sent a soothing note into our conversation. Sitting on a bench, I took a deep breath, allowing the scent of blooming roses to envelop us. "I am terrified," James confessed, his voice barely loud enough to pierce the blanket of silence enveloping us. "Everything feels like it's slipping away." "Then let's hold on tighter," I said, trying to summon the courage I felt fading between my fingers. He looked at me with an intensity that brought my heart to my throat. "I don't want to lose you, Ashlyn." The gravity of his words filled the space between us, and I could feel the tension thrumming in the air, awaiting the next moment to either tighten or release. My heart longed to reassure him, yet my thoughts darted to Aliyah and the undeniable connection they shared. "James, if you go to the retreat, I'll support you," I said, my voice trembling as I bespoke the truth that haunted me. "But you need to promise you won't lose sight of Yusuf. What we have." He glanced away, the flicker of uncertainty settling back in like a cold sheet. What if I emerge changed? What if those memories don't return, and instead, I find something else? Something? He hesitated. More. The fragility of our promises hung in the air, seemingly dance partners bound to a tragic waltz. Despite the hope in my heart, an angry voice roared within, demanding an answer I wasn't sure of. Just then, the hospital doors swung open, pulling us back into the rapidly unraveling world of beeping machines and urgency. Aliyah emerged, her expression a blend of determination and concern. Her presence sparked an unsettling energy, igniting my fears anew. The way she moved, focusing intently on everyone around her, reminded me of the lioness determined to shield her cubs from the dangers prowling just outside their shelter. James looked from me to Aliyah, and for one moment, a painful silence danced around USA's silent scream echoing the unspoken feelings brewing beneath the surface. "Aliyah," James beckoned, his voice tinged with both hope and apprehension, as if he were reaching for a lifeline that might drift away. "Are you really okay?" Aliyah knelt before him, her eyes shimmering with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "Of course, I'm here," she replied gently, her hand brushing against his. Always, the sight of their hands touching sent an electric shock coursing through me, a reminder of the emotional divide growing wider with each passing moment. "Ashlyn," James turned back to me, "I want to find out who I am. I need to." His words twisted in my gut like a shard of ice. "You will always be you," I responded, my voice rising against the weight of uncertainty. "But I also know, my heart knows that you might find something new," and tears threatened to spill the secrets I held desperately inside. I wanted to tell him that I'd fight for him, but what if fighting meant letting go? Would I risk losing my heart completely? As I wrestled with my emotions, my heart sank as I felt the unmistakable heaviness of disappointment mingling with fear. I had come here to soothe him, yet suddenly, I felt smaller, invisible in the gravity of their connection. In that moment, we heard the overhead intercom blaring again. "Code Blue Room 301. The loud voice reverberated through the corridors like a harbinger of doom, and panic washed over Aliyah's face. "For the briefest of moments. I have to go," she said, her voice sharp as she stood up abruptly. "I'm needed." The sheer urgency in her tone was enough to set the room ablaze with uncertainty. As she sprinted toward the chaotic scene unfolding within the hospital, I felt a disconnect settle over me, like a curtain shielding us from the hard reality of what was happening. As I watched James' gaze follow her in sudden desperation, uncertainty roared through me. I stepped back, struggling to breathe under the weight of my own feelings. "Stay with me," I whispered once again, desperately grasping his hand. His confusion gripped me tighter than the looming uncertainty of what might follow. What if Aliyah never returned? What if James walked away from both of us, choosing the path of healing without me? And behind the flickering lights of the hospital, uncertainty draped the world around us, wrapping us in a shroud of unanswered questions. I could feel the endings and beginnings coiling around us, and the silence eroding the foundation we once stood on. In that moment, I realized the truth. We were facing the precipice of change, teetering on the edge of potential loss, a heart-wrenching irony considering we hadn't even begun to find ourselves yet. The silence in the garden grew heavier with each passing second, like the charged atmosphere before a storm. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the turmoil swirling within me. James stood frozen, his eyes searching the hallways Aliyah had disappeared into, as if he could will her return through sheer force of will. I felt invisible in my own body, standing beside him, feeling the enormity of the moment crash against the shore of our fragile relationship. James, the first whispered, as if speaking his name could tether him back, could draw him out of whatever spell had been cast by Aliyah's sudden departure. But my voice felt frail, dissipating into the net of uncertainty surrounding us. I squeezed his hand tighter, needing him to focus on me. Look at me. He finally turned, searching my eyes for something I feared could vanish in an instant. The intensity of his gaze sent a rush of warmth through me, even as cold shadows crept into the corners of my heart. What if something happens to her? He asked, the concern almost palpable. Then we take a deep breath, I encouraged, wishing my words carried the weight of healing. We have to stay present, James. For us. But he was lost, caught in the pull of potential loss, and I could see the battle waging within him. With each moment, I felt the distance grow, the gulf between my love and his uncertainty widening into an abyss. A rustle in the garden interrupted my spiraling thoughts. A volunteer worker ambled by, offering small cups of juice and smiling softly at us, their kindness momentarily piercing through the haze of anxiety that clung to us like smoke. I accepted a cup, wrapping my fingers around the cool plastic, using the distraction to steady my thoughts. Thank you, I said, my voice threading warmth into the frigid air between us. James hesitated before accepting his own cup, our fingers grazing as we passed it back and forth. It was a small moment of connection, but it felt monumental, like a candle flickering defiantly against the enveloping dark. He took a sip, and I watched, desperate for a glimpse of the familiar smile that had the power to melt through my worry. Instead, his shoulders sagged, and he looked away toward the entrance as the commotion inside the hospital escalated again. James, I started gently, I need you to know that I love you no matter what. No matter how lost you feel or how many paths you find ahead of you. He met my gaze, eyes glistening, revealing the flames of vulnerability that danced dangerously close to his heart. But Ashlyn, what if you find it hard to love me when I come back? If I'm not the same, then we'll discover who you are together. I promise I won't turn away, I replied, fighting the knot threatening to strangle my words. But I can't do this alone. A flicker of understanding passed between us, but before he could respond, a distant commotion drew both our attentions again. Shouting echoed through the hospital halls, accompanied by the heart-stopping sound of rolling carts. My insides twisted, igniting my need to shield him, to protect what we barely held. Whatever that is, it's okay, I whispered, more for my own sake than his. We can handle anything together. But the truth hung like a shadow. Could we handle the change that was creeping closer, unraveling the fabric of our lives, tying us to questions we dared not voice? Just then, a figure emerged from the hospital, panting, streaks of urgency across her brow. It was Dr. Lane, her doctor's coat fluttering behind her, the look on her face sending a chill down my spine. James. Ashlyn. She called out, urgency seeping into each syllable as she hurried over. Dr. Lane, is everything okay? I cried out, my heart racing. She stopped breathing for a split second, the weight of her presence revealing more than words could convey. There's been an accident regarding a patient in room 301. Aliyah is she's. I could barely process her words as the weight of impending dread crashed over me. I looked at James and saw the skin drain from his face. His hand slipped from mine, a slow release of trust and connection. The world around me seemed to tremble beneath the gravity of her revelation, and I held my breath against the crushing sensation closing in on my chest. His eyes widened with fear, delineating pain and reality. What happened? He shouted, desperation seeping into his voice. Dr. Lane's gaze dipped from his face to the ground, her hesitation aching in the silence that stretched like a taut string about to snap. I'm sorry, James. We need to prepare you. It's serious. Time froze as my thoughts reeled back to the connection James shared with Aliyah, a moment of hope wrapped in uncertainty, just as I had felt with him on this very bench moments ago. Would the fates rewind in some cruel game, unveiling the fragility of our ties? Everything hung in a delicate balance, a tightrope where love and loss walked hand in hand. Would I still stand in the light of our love if darkness swept away all we held dear? Please, no, I whispered into the silence, watching helplessly as James went pale, completely unmoored from the haven of our shared vows. The curtain fell between us, and I was left alone, standing on the precipice, staring into the abyss of what lay ahead, an uncompromising test of faith, love, and the choices yet to unfold. The air pulsed with a heavy, tensed silence as Dr. Lane's words dissolved into the chaotic sounds of the hospital behind me. James stood frozen, a statue chiseled from the granite of despair, his face blank and pale, as if the life had been siphoned from him in an instant. I reached for him, but his existence felt distant, like a reflection in a shattered mirror, splintered and abstract. "James, please," I urged, desperation lacing my voice. I wanted to close the distance, to tether him back to me with my words, my presence, anything. Yet each syllable caught in my throat, rendered intangible by the gravity of the moment. I can't do this," he mumbled, the tremor in his voice cracking my heart into further fragments. The foundation we had built seemed ready to crumble, our dreams swirling around us, threatening to disappear like smoke on the wind. Dr. Lane took a cautious step forward, her eyes full of empathy, understanding pain that felt too familiar. "We'll do everything we can for Aliyah," she reassured him, but the hollowness in James' gaze indicated he had already lost her in his heart. "We need to see her," James demanded, his urgency sharpening the air. "Please, I need to know she's okay." I moved closer, encouraging him with a gentle squeeze of his trembling hand. "James, let's breathe," I whispered, willing both of us to seek solace in the familiar rhythm of shared breaths. "We can prepare ourselves for whatever is happening." His chest heaved in a quickened pulse, but he barely acknowledged me, instead looking back to Dr. Lane with eyes that held a maelstrom of emotion, fear, desperation, and a wealth of unanswerable questions. With a heavy sigh, she nodded, turning towards the hospital entrance. "Follow me. I'll take you to her." James' movements were like those of someone lost, stumbling toward an inevitable cliff. I chased closely behind, my heart thrumming in rhythm with the hurried beat of our footsteps. As we navigated through the labyrinth of sterile hallways, I found fleeting moments of connection with passing nurses and doctors, their nods and reassuring glances like small beacons of hope in an expanding ocean of uncertainty. Despite myself, a small whisper of gratitude flickered in my chest when I caught sight of an elderly patient in a wheelchair, frail yet clutching at a bouquet of wilting flowers. Their eyes met mine, and in that moment, I felt a spark of warmth. Perhaps I was witnessing the unbreakable bond of love, even in its most fragile form. But as quickly as that warmth was ignited, dread plunged into my gut, a reminder of the weight of what lay ahead. My thoughts twisted back to James. Would he even remember how to love me in the vortex of his own fears? Dr. Lane paused at a door, her expression serious, before pushing it gently open to reveal room 301. "I need you to be strong for her," she cautioned, her tone heavy with the weight of unseen burdens. "She needs your support now more than ever." James stepped into the room, his face set like stone. I lingered behind, tethered to the hope that still pulsed in my heart. The fluorescent lights flickered, bathing the small space in an unforgiving glow that felt stark against the comforting embrace of the garden we had just fled. Aliyah lay frail and broken in the hospital bed, surrounded by the droning hum of machines and the antiseptic scent that infiltrated every fiber of my being. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and an ominous beeping from the heart monitor punctuated the fragility of her existence. I held my breath as James moved closer, his shadow cascading over her. "Aliyah," he murmured, his voice quaking like a whisper on the wind. "I'm here." The tremor in his tone pulled at my heart, unraveling threads I didn't know I had woven into the fabric of my existence. But as James knelt by her side and intertwined his fingers with Aliyah's, a small flutter of jealousy ignited within me, igniting old insecurities. In that moment, I could feel their connect-Iona bond hurt by time, yet resilient against the encroaching darkness. "James," I began, but the words crumbled on my lips. I couldn't interject into this delicate moment. Instead, I stepped farther back, waiting, heart racing with unease. The minutes scraped by, each second like a grain of sand slipping through the hourglass. My longing for James hardened into fear, the fear of losing him not only to Aliyah but also to this veering path we now tread. And if Aliyah's presence nudged his heart towards the decay of our love, how could I ever compete? Suddenly, a soft groan emerged from the bed. Aliyah's eyes fluttered open, glazed and searching. She blinked, the recognition dawning with painstaking slowness, and I found myself holding my breath. In this moment, "You're my light," I murmured to the invisible presence of love. Perhaps there was still a sliver of hope left for us, a narrow window through which we could still find our way back to each other, but as Aliyah's gaze locked onto James, the dream that had begun to take root within me withered. "James," she breathed, and I felt the weight of those two syllables like the earth splitting beneath me. As doubt crept into my heart, I didn't see the truth standing just beyond my Ria-chan unspoken connection and a bond we were all navigating, tangled within the shadows of uncertainty. James' eyes glimmered with an intensity that mirrored a depth of emotions I hadn't seen before: love, desperation, confusion, like a flame flickering against the darkening tide. And in that moment of unprepared vulnerability, I realized the truth hanging like a weight above our fragile lives. The healer, the soul who had stitched their way into our hearts, had come to define the very nature of love itself, unraveling everything I thought I knew about the sacrifice of connection. It felt as if I was standing at the edge of a precipice, gazing into the abyss of an uncertain future, bracing myself for the impact of the revelations that awaited us. Little did I know, a secret lurked in the corners of their shared history, one that could either bind us together in ways we could never imagine or shatter our lives forever. The room buzzed with an electric tension, like the calm before a storm. Aliyah's eyes seemed to pull James into an orbit that I was no longer a part of. I could see the neurons firing in his mind, memories resurfacing, joys and sorrows riding the waves of his emotions. My heart sank with every flicker of recognition on his face as he leaned closer, reaching for her hand with an urgency I had almost forgotten existed in our relationship. Tears welled in my eyes as I took a step back, feeling myself dissolving into the sterile walls, the fluorescent lights overhead now seeming like grim stars, cold and unwelcoming. The gaping chasm of jealousy appeared anew, a creature I thought I'd tamed. Aliyah had returned, and with her came all the unfulfilled promises of our shared dreams. Desperately, I searched the room for answers, a way to find my footing in this suddenly shifting landscape. The gentle hum of the machines was a stark reminder of the life at stake, a ticking clock drumming the pace of our fraying connections. I longed to comfort James, yet every attempt felt like treading water in a stormy sea. "Aliyah," James whispered again, his voice thick and raw. "You scared me. I thought I'd lost you." The sincerity in his declaration hit me like a wave, a relentless undercurrent dragging me further from the shore. As Aliyah blinked at him, her gaze dropping to the ring still snug on her finger, I felt a churning turmoil, a mixture of deep sadness and fierce protectiveness. I had always known the girl who wore that ring, the girl whose laughter had entwined with James through the years, but seeing her in a hospital bed invoked a primal urge deep within me, one I couldn't quite articulate. A wisp of movement caught my eye. The elderly patient with flowers from earlier was being wheeled down the corridor by a nurse. Their gentle smiles tethered me to a fleeting hope, a reminder that life, so fragile and fleeting, could still inspire kindness. It made me want to reach out, yet how could I hold on to kindness when the roots of my own happiness were tangled in the heartbreak before me? Suddenly, a voice broke the delicate thread of my thoughts. It was Dr. Lane, her presence grounding and warm, as if she could sense the chaos swirling inside. "James, Aliyah's recovery will take time, but she's stable," she said gently. "We need to make sure she has the support she needs." Her eyes flicked to me, and I felt a rush of understanding pass between us. "Can I get you anything?" I forced the words out. Perhaps I could still weave my threads into this tapestry of love and loss. "A snack? Something to drink?" James opened his mouth to respond, but Aliyah's soft voice interjected, frail but fierce, "No. Stay with me, James." Her eyes sparkled suddenly with a fierce determination, as if she was willing herself to rise from this bed of shadows. James hesitated. I could see him weighing his words, wrestling with his devotion to her against the shared connection we had fought to build. His hand tightened around hers, a shield forged in memories that felt like weapons drawn against me. "Okay, I'm here," he replied, an echo of uncertainty lacing his tone. The air thickened. I couldn't bear to intrude any longer. I turned away to hide the sting of betrayal, the loneliness swallowing me whole. It wasn't just James the first grieved for it was the love we had built, the moment when he returned with food, his laughter brightening dreary nights. James. I burst out, the words escaping before I could rein them in. What does this mean for us? For you? I clamped my mouth shut, but the question hung thick in the air, an uninvited spectre. James' eyes darted to me, surprised, and for a moment, the shadows of doubt passed over his face. I don't know. A shard of hope and agony twisted in my chest. I thought I would die if he turned back to Aliyah completely, abandoning me like a forgotten trinket. The truth was, as much as I needed him to see our life, I feared the cascading fall if his heart wholly embraced her. Breathe, I reminded myself silently, yet it reverberated like a mantra of desperation. Before I could gather my thoughts, Aliyah spoke again, this time her voice firmer, almost demanding. James, tell her, she insisted, her eyes darting between us like a flickering light in a dark room. What are you talking about? James asked, bewilderment mingling with a need to protect his own delicate balance of emotions, but Aliyah pressed on, determination glistening in her eyes. Tell her the truth about us. She deserves to know, James. The world stilled, the air thick with the promise of an unspooling revelation. My heart raced, teetering on the edge of something monumental. I could barely breathe as time stretched like an elastic band, both exhilarating and terrifying. What truth? I whispered, my voice trembling, equal parts fear and curiosity. I took a step forward, grasping for answers as if my fingers could anchor me in a reality that refused to relent. James swayed between us, his face a canvas of shattered emotions. And suddenly, in that moment of looming uncertainty, I realized the truth we were all dancing around might not only redefine us but threaten everything: our love, our past, and the fragile ties binding us together. Aliyah, he started, and I could see the weight of unsaid stories pressing on his shoulders. But before he could find his voice, an alarm blared in the room, slicing through the tension with an urgency that felt like a death knell. James snapped to attention, his focus shifting back to Aliyah, whose eyes widened in fear, sharing a moment that crashed over us all like a tidal wave. Amidst the chaos, uncertainty gripped my heart like a vice, tightening with each passing second. The revelations that lay ahead felt more dangerous than the cut of any knife. Did I end those final seconds? A revelation hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of no return. As James moved closer to Aliyah, instinctively reaching for her, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were irrevocably intertwined, and the truth was about to shatter us all. The air thickened with tension as the alarm blared on, a staccato note of urgency that filled the room and clawed at my insides. My heart raced, fear twisting tight in my chest, as I watched James drop Aliyah's hand and turn toward the medical equipment, his expression suddenly frantic. I was losing my grip on the reality around me, my senses sharpening with dread. The nurse rushed in, her movements fluid and practiced. Stay calm, everyone. Just a moment, she called out, her hands moving deftly over the machinery. Each beep and ping intensified the chaos, blending with my thoughts, creating a whirlpool of questions. What was happening? Was Aliyah slipping away again? The look in James' eyes shifted, transforming from a love so profound into a deep-seated fear that echoed off the walls around us. I felt like an outsider, rooted in uncertainty, now holding my breath amid the thrumming tension. Aliyah, stay with us. A voice called, like a lifeboat thrown into the stormy waters. It was Dr. Lane, who reached Aliyah's side in a matter of moments, her presence radiating strength. We've got this. You're going to be okay. James took a step closer, and I instinctively followed, the impulse to be there for him battling fiercely with my desire to keep my distance. Aliyah's face twisted in a mixture of pain and panic, her breaths quickening, a mirror of my own racing heart. What was this moment revealing? What depths of love would be tested if we lost her? The fear of losing two people in one moment felt incomprehensible. I stared at the scene unfolding before me, longing to reach out to James but feeling paralyzed by the crack between us. This was not just Aliyah's fight, it was ours, too. Suddenly, a shift happened. A nurse's hand reached for Aliyah's, her soothing voice piercing through the alarm. Everything is going to be okay. We're here. Those simple words, wrapped in kindness, were like a balm to my panic. For a split second, I felt a flicker of hope, a reminder in the midst of chaos that there can be light, even in the darkest of moments. And then I saw fire in Aliya's eyes. Despite the chaos, she was fighting, she was alive, and she was more than just a ghost of our shared past. But beneath that determination, I sensed a vulnerability nestled in her soul. The weight of their shared history was heavy, pulling me into those memories intertwined with her laughter and joy that once belonged to all three of us. Tell her, James, Aliya urged again, her voice growing stronger, even as the machines whirred ominously. It was as if she intended to force him to awaken something deep within himself, not just an admission of truth but a realization of love that had been buried beneath the surface. As the nurse continued her work to stabilize Aliya, I stood there, powerless. Little moments flickered through my mind: the day James had held my hand on that sunny park bench, the laughter echoing through our shared moments, the warmth of his shoulder when I had been cold. How, amidst all this, did we seamlessly shift from bliss to heartbreak? James, I pleaded, my voice breaking through the fog that enveloped me. Please don't let her go. Don't let us go. But there was a storm brewing in his eyes, torn between the past and present. Conflicted. Tempted by Aliya's unwavering gaze, but just as captivated by the memories forged with me. The space between us felt insurmountably a chasm that threatened to swallow everything whole. Finally, the machines quieted, and Aliya's eyes fluttered as she struggled to focus. James, she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with desperation. You must tell her before it's too late. Time stood still. What truth? I demanded helplessly, urgency coursing through my veins. Tell me. Whatever it is, just say it. The walls felt like they were caving in, the fear of becoming a shadow in both their lives made my heart ache. But before he could respond, a nurse stepped forward, her expression grave. We are going to need you to wait outside for a moment, while we administer treatment. It's important we keep the atmosphere calm. I'm not leaving her, James said fiercely, stepping in front of me. His protective stance was instinctual, yet it felt like a dagger in my heart, the division between us raw and painful. Please, just step outside for a minute, the nurse insisted, her voice gentle yet firm. No, he replied, his tone laced with both fear and defiance. I won't leave her side. I stood there, caught in a trembling balance of longing and despair, roiling within like a tempest. The nurse's gaze darted to me, and in that moment I felt the layers of desperation unfurling. I knew I should back away, give them space, but how could I when everything felt so fragile? The flash of hope I'd felt earlier dimmed, my heart aching not just for Aliya and James but for the life we once had. I was losing him, perhaps even losing myself. But just as darkness threatened to swallow us, the nurse uttered words that made my blood run cold. We need to prepare for an emergency surgery. If we don't act fast, we may lose her. Panic surged through my veins, and I instinctively reached for James' hand, grasping it tightly as if it were a lifeline. The reminder was sudden and raw: this love we shared was not easily severed. I felt the bond attempting to bridge the gap created by Aliya. In those fraught moments, just before turmoil engulfed everything, I realized that once again, I was caught in a fate spiraling out of my control. The truth hung over us like storm clouds, and as the doors swung shut behind the nurse, both James and I felt the weight of impending revelation crush down upon us. Aliya, he murmured, eyes wide with turmoil. That I did not know what we would face next, yet as James looked back at me, there was an unspoken question hanging in the air. The meaning they both embodied surged with electric tension, and I feared that the truth of our hearts might be forever changed. The sterile smell of the hospital mixed with an overwhelming sense of dread that permeated the air as I stood in the dim hallway, my heart pounding in tandem with the relentless beeping of the machines inside. James' presence beside me felt like a lifeline, yet the dissonance between us clung heavily, a reminder that we were not merely united in our love for Aliya but also tethered by an unbearable complexity. Do you think she'll be okay? I whispered, my voice barely carrying over the ambient sounds of the hospital. I longed for reassurance, but the uncertainty gnawed away at any sliver of hope I had held on to moments before. James's silence was thunderous, and as I turned to face him, I noticed the uncertainty etched into his features. His gaze was lost somewhere in the sterile tiles, as he wrestled with demons that now clawed at our future, the truth still unspoken that danced between us like a ghost. I don't know, but we have to believe, he finally murmured, the words tentative and fragile. The resolve that once radiated from him dimmed, and my chest tightened with the weight of our shared fear, one that had taken root in the cracks of our connection, blossoming in our moments of weakness. We stood there waiting for what felt like an eternity, the atmosphere thickening with unwelcome thoughts. What if I began but quickly swallowed the words, fearing they'd give life to nightmares better left unimagined. I hated that doubt lurked in the shadows of our minds, poisoning the hope that flickered on the edges. Just then, a nurse emerged through the door, her expression both reassuring and grave. "We're taking her into surgery now." She looked between us, as if gauging our emotional state. "You are welcome to wait here. I'll keep you informed." I nodded, needing to cling to something tangible in the wake of chaotic uncertainty. "Thank you," James said, his voice steady once again, although I could see the tremors beneath the surface. As the doors swung shut, and silence enveloped us once more, I felt the heaviness around us thicken into something palpable. "What do we do now?" I asked, though I wasn't sure whether I directed my question towards James or simply to the universe in hopes of an answer. I guess we wait." His response felt inadequate, but it was all we had. Time slipped away from us, each passing minute stretching and distorting within the confines of fear. Desperate for distraction, I traced the frayed edges of my thoughts, wandering back to lighter moments, the laughter of summers spent together, the warmth of a shared blanket on cold nights, and the dreams we had for a future that now felt precarious. Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice broke through the fog of my memories. "You're here for Aliyah?" We turned to see a young woman walking towards us, her scrubs covered in cartoon characters, an odd contrast to the somberness around us. She glanced at James, then back at me, her expression inviting but cautious. "Yes," James replied, his tone guarded. "I am Tara, one of the surgical interns. I just came from pre-op." Her eyes sparkled with empathy. "I know this is hard, but Aliyah is a fighter. She's had a tough road, but she has so much light in her." Her words struck a chord deep within me. They were saturated with hope, raw and unrefined. "Do you really think so?" I asked, needing that affirmation to anchor me. "Absolutely," Tara said with a confidence that brought warmth to our bleak surroundings. "She's inspired everyone on the team. It's hard not to root for her." James' eyes softened, and for the first time, I could see a flicker of resolve reappear. I felt a spark of shared purpose igniting between us, a reminder that we weren't alone in this fight. "Thank you," he said quietly, sincerity reflecting in his tone. It was as if Tara's dedication had injected new energy into our conversation, softening some of the sharp edges of fear. As time dragged on, small interactions with Tara became our lifeline, constant reminder of humanity amidst the chaos. We learned about her compassion for patients, and soon she shared anecdotes of Aliyah's audacity, her courage bringing smiles to her colleagues even during the darkest days. But intertwined with our moments of levity, there was still the looming shadow of unsaid truths. The tension thickened once more as I found myself stealing glances at James, longing to break through the barriers rebuilding their intricate history together. Each fleeting moment felt charged as I questioned what lay beneath the surface of unspoken love and lingering secrets. Suddenly, the surgery doors opened again, and the lead surgeon entered, his brow furrowed and his eyes serious. My heart plummeted. There have been some complications in that moment. Everything I had felt a semblance of control over spiraled into chaos once more. I looked at James, fear dancing wildly in his eyes as the words echoed like a thunderclap in my mind, and then, just before the surgeon could elaborate, Aliyah's name sliced through the tension with unexpected urgency, and my heart skipped. "We need to know," I urged instinctively, feeling James' grip tighten at my side. The surgeon paused, his gaze catching mine, and there was something in the air, a shift, an acknowledgement of the unspoken stakes. A battle of scarcity versus hope hung between us, fragile yet relentless. Aliyah's situation is dire. However, before we proceed, there's something you need to discuss, something that affects her life and yours. In that moment, I realized we stood on the precipice of a pivotal choice, a new challenge that demanded not only our hearts but our vulnerability. The truth, the very one Aliyah had urged James to uncover, loomed large, ready to shatter everything we knew and put it through the gauntlet of love and loss. I felt James' body stiffen beside me, a mix of fear and resignation flickering across his face as we stared into the uncertainties of what was to come. "Please," I breathed, sensing the weight of the world pressing down upon us. "Tell us." The surgeon took a deep breath, his composure unwavering yet weighed down by a burden he could not conceal. Alia's condition is critical, but there is a procedure that could help her, he began, each word feeling like sand falling through an hourglass, irreversible and heavy. However, it requires consent from both of you, given the risks involved. You need to be aware of everything at stake. James' jaw tightened, and I could see the muscles in his neck constrict as the reality of the situation settled in. I felt the air grow thick, swirling with the remnants of unanswered questions and the sharp reminder of our respective roles in this unfolding grief. What do you mean both of us? He asked, the edge of his voice cutting through the room's tension. Alia's past has complicating factors that I can't disclose unless you both agree to navigate this together. He hesitated, his gaze shifting between the two of us, as if searching for the right words tethered in unspoken truths. Confusion washed over me, followed by rising panic. Why can't you just tell us? I pressed, my voice wavering even as I attempted to sound resolute. Some decisions can only be made in the presence of full understanding. It felt like a game of twisted chess, every second of indecision pushing Alia further away from us. I reached for James' arm, needing to anchor myself in the storm of conflicting emotions. James, we need to trust what Hes saying. He turned to me, the depths of his eyes clouded with fear and trepidation. But what are we missing? What don't we know? The war in his mind was palpable, and I felt the foundation we stood upon fraying under the strain. Before any treatment can commence, the surgeon continued, you must know that there's an enormous risk associated with what we wish to do. Alia's chance of success hinges not only on her physical resilience but also on the emotional truths within your relationship. Emotional truths? I echoed, bewildered. What the hell is he talking about? But I could see the flicker of recognition in James' demeanor, an acknowledgement of potential secrets buried deep in Alia's past, secrets he had tried to understand but found overwhelming. I'm sorry, I breathed, more to myself than to him. I know this is hard. We have to hang on. Suddenly, the thought struck me, was there some kind of unspoken agreement or burden between James and Alia that I had yet to grasp? This feeling gnawed at my insides, making the air around us feel stagnant, suffocating. James stared at the surgeon, his voice trembling, we need to know. The surgeon gestured for us to sit down, and reluctantly we obeyed, sinking into the sterile vinyl chairs that felt far too flimsy against the weight of the conversation. Alia has a condition that involves not just her physical state but emotional heartache, tied to decisions she once made, something that has implications for all of us moving forward. Tension twisted painfully in my stomach. What kind of decisions? On her medical history and providing informed consent for this procedure, you need to understand who she truly is and what she has faced, all her fears, including significant trauma. Only then can you decide if you're willing to risk the chance of losing her fighting spirit. I felt the weight of each revelation pressing down on me. What do you mean by risk? There are procedures that could increase her chances, but they will mean digging up deep-rooted scars that have impacted her potential memories she's long buried, tied to feelings of betrayal and abandonment. A shiver ran down my spine. You mean emotional trauma that could affect her treatment? Precisely, and it's something that could break her if it surfaces too late. The room fell eerily silent, leaving me to reconcile with the knowledge that Alia's future hinged not only on surgery, but on unraveling something more profound and more heartbreaking than I could fathom. Suddenly, a thought pierced through my haze of confusion. Had Alia hidden these truths from me, knowing it would hurt James more than it would protect her? And what then about the fragile connection between the three of us? As I glanced at James, I could see the turmoil in his eyes, a tempest of fear, regret, and a flicker of hope. What if we don't agree? He asked weakly, his voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. If you do not provide consent, we can only proceed with what we know, which may limit her chances, the surgeon replied. However, that choice must come from a place of clarity, from understanding the emotional landscape as well as the physical challenges. You would put that much weight on us? I questioned, trying to contain my rising frustration. It is essential. Your love for her may become the very strength she draws on during perilous moments. I closed my eyes, feeling every moment polished by the gravity of life and death. As I released a shaky breath, hope and fear danced chaotically within my heart, twirling around memories, each with its own stakes and emotions entwined. We were standing on the edge of an abyss, teetering between love's fierce loyalty and uncertainty. Immediately, a voice echoed louder inside me. Would I be brave enough to face those truths? To help Aliyah confront whatever hidden scar she bore in secret? In that charged moment, I understood that I couldn't turn away. Despite the weight of the choices, despite the uncertainty, every part of me yearned to fight for Aliyah, for the love we cherished. Tell us what we need to do, I finally said, feeling resolute, my voice firm. James turned to me, the very act igniting a spark of reassurance between us. But as the surgeon prepared to divulge Aliyah's truths, an urgent beeping from a distant monitor echoed through the hallway. The sound quickened, each beep more urgent than the last, and a cold sweat broke out across my brow. Something's wrong, James said, but before we could move, another staff member rushed past us, the urgency palpable. My heart raced even faster as our knees gripped me, and amidst impending revelations, I suddenly feared we were running out of time. What powerful truth awaited us behind the veil of Aliyah's hidden past, and could we uncover it before it was too late? In the grip of uncertainty, we stood once again on the precipice of the unknown, hearts pounding, breaths shallow, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I sat in the waiting room, feeling the world fall away around me. The fluorescent lights hummed above, and each tick of the clock echoed like a heartbeat. My thoughts spiraled out of control. I had just stepped beyond the threshold of uncertainty, poised on the brink of becoming a part of something greater. Yet now, it felt like I was tethered to shadows as fear wrapped its fingers around my heart, squeezing tightly. What had we learned? What truths could forge a path forward? With every pulse of uncertainty, James and I teetered on the edge of our hearts, fragile connections balanced delicately between love and fear. And Aliyah, her name felt like an anchor in turbulent waters, both a lifeline and an unshakable reminder of the emotions that pulled us in disparate directions. An array of moments flickered across my mind, her laughter, the warmth of her smile, the way she fought for James with every fiber of her being. Each recollection stirred twin pangs of longing and jealousy inside me, twisting and ravaging. Could I still be part of this tapestry if those threads wound tighter around them? Just then, a nurse stepped into the waiting room and interrupted my spiraling thoughts. James Hayes? She called, scanning the room. I nudged James gently, who had buried his face in his hands. He looked up, weariness and hope etched on his features. That's me, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. She beckoned him closer, her expression grave yet supportive. We just performed surgery on Aliyah. It's going to take some time for her to come around, but we need to discuss the next steps as her emergency contact. I felt the twinge of jealousy surface, but more so, a fierce protectiveness over Aliyah unfurled within me. I couldn't help but feel drawn into their world once more. I had to be there for James, for Aliyah. We all needed one another, whether we liked it or not. I followed closely as he stood up, and soon, we were ushered into a small consultation room. The nurse explained everything she needed from us, but I barely registered her words. The anticipation hung thick, and I could feel the tension crawling beneath my skin. I stole a glance at James, who was sitting on the edge of a chair, eyes riveted on the door, waiting for news. We should have been there for her, he murmured, regret heavy in his voice. I should have known. You didn't know, James, I said softly, resisting the urge to reach out and hold his hand. None of us did. But deep down, I felt the heart of the matter. What awaited us was more than awareness, it was the unveiling of secrets, the layers of Aliyah's existence that had remained hidden, tangled amidst love and friendship. Would we be strong enough to face them? The nurse returned moments later, her expression brighter. Aliyah is stable, and you can see her soon. But first, she has requested to speak to both of you together. She feels there's something important she needs to share. James shot me a look, confusion mixed with trepidation, and I met his gaze with the strongest sense of solidarity I could muster. We'll do this together, I reassured him, feeling the weight of unspoken promises hanging between us. When we finally stepped into Aliyah's room, the heaviness in my chest grew tenfold. The machines hummed softly around her, but she appeared more fragile than I had ever seen. Her hair was matted against the pillow, eyes fluttering open as we approached. The sight of her alone felt like a punch to the gut, the reality of her circumstances washing over me like icy water. Aliyah, James breathed, stepping closer as I hovered by the door, watching the threads of their connection intertwine with painful clarity. You scared us. She smiled weakly, and though it didn't reach her eyes, it was so breathtakingly genuine that I could feel the room warm despite the chill of uncertainty. I'm sorry for everything, she started, her voice shaky but steady. But I don't have much time. I need you both to hear me, to understand. A tightness gripped my heart as I moved closer, finding solace in James' presence beside me. Aliyah, I urged, stepping forward. What do you need us to understand? I need you both to know my pasto understand how complex love and life can be, she whispered. And in doing this, you have to promise to forgive me. My breath hitched in my throat as I saw something raw and vulnerable behind her eyes, revealing a depth I hadn't fully grasped before. We're listening, James said, the threads of worry clinging to him. We sat in a tight circle, the air thickening as she braced herself for whatever lay ahead. I lived with something buried deep within. Just as my healing intertwined with your lives, I often felt like I was hiding. Each word poured from her like a melody with lines of heartbreak woven through. I never wanted to be a burden. After surviving something profounder, betrayal that reshaped my vowed to rebuild and save others. Through my healing, I thought I could mend the past, the breath caught in my throat. What lay beneath Aliyah's stoic surface was a history drenched in pain and shame. What was it? I whispered, though my heart raced in fear of what was to follow. Her gaze flickered from James to me, as if weighing the burden of truth. I lost a loved one once because I couldn't protect them. I forged walls and distanced myself from intimacy as a way to survive. But it led me to neglect the most important parts of myself. And I thought if I became a healer, I could save everyone but myself. Tears brimmed in my eyes at the depth of her soul, trapped between the promise of connection and the haunting void of her past. My heart softened, and an unexpected wave of compassion lulled within me. Aliyah, I started, but she raised a shaking hand to silence me. I let my connections become laced with my insecurities. James, I need you to understand how much I care, but I also need you to know I have loved like you both have. I've kept secrets and distanced myself from emotions in fear of losing others, losing you. Her voice trembled as she took in both our perplexed expressions. I let you think you were losing yourself, Ashlyn. And you, James, think you need to choose. But between the love I feel for both of you exists an intricate bond. One was never here to pull you apart. It was a bitter truth, one that caught like rusted barbs against my heart. The realization echoed through me like the rolling waves of the ocean. Her love was meant to bind us, not tear us apart. Still, there lingered a heaviness in the air, the knowledge that our decisions now rested not only in our hands but in Aliyah's unearthing as well. So, what do we do now? I pleaded, feeling the tumultuous emotions roiling within me. You decide, she whispered, her voice both shaky and resolute. You must all decide what this means to each of you. I may not know how to move forward, but together when you share your truths, it's how love reconciles darkness. I want you both to share your love. In that moment, clarity washed over me. We weren't here to choose between love, friendship, obligation, or pain. Instead, we were to transform that love into acceptance, into understanding. The air shifted, brimming with possibility, and I knew then that acceptance didn't demand perfection, it meant embracing vulnerability. James hesitated, his heart thumping loudly against the silence as he pressed his hand against Aliyah's. You need to let us help you, he choked back, determination rising in his voice. We're all in this together. I will stand by your side, Aliyah. You're stronger than you think, but you have to allow us in. Aliyah's eyes gleamed with tears, painful and beautiful. Then let your truth wield power. Your healing starts now, and it's one we'll share together. And in that moment, an extraordinary shift unfurled between us. He past delivered heavy burdens yet paved a path through to acceptance and forgiveness. Together, we were intricately bound through the tapestry of our hearts, weaving strands of love that would encase our scars, transforming them into warmth. Life had delivered us unimaginable hardship, yet through it, something beautiful awaited. As James turned to me, uncertainty still hung like mist in the air, but I felt the connection between us fragile yet unwavering. No matter what unfolds, I murmured, I will always be here. He bit his lip and, for a fleeting second, vulnerability coursed through him in ripples, rendering those seconds timeless. Then, with quiet confidence, he replied, we will find a way, together. In that fragile moment, I grasped his hand tightly, the fabric of our love holding us steady against the tempest. Each pulse filled me with the confidence that we could face anything the world tossed at us. And as Aliyah closed her eyes, finding peace amid the chaos, I realized this was just the beginning. A new dawn awaited us, one illuminated by acceptance and illuminated by love's gorgeous complexity. As we navigated the fractures and realities of life, I understood that while love may not always be simple, its unveiling could lead to healing. "This is only the beginning," I whispered, squeezing James' hand. No matter how tumultuous the journey ahead, we would face it together, woven tightly through both pain and joy, our hearts beating as one. Maybe that would be the ultimate truth as we forged onward into the unknown. And somehow, through it all, as we faced whatever lay ahead, our love story would eternally echo the timeless refrain, a melody of hope even during life's darkest trials. Together.